Welcome to Woodworking with Wes. We have a special project this week. Many of you know Jared. We've had him on videos before. He's helped us through some painting issues. He's a professional painter. We're in his home today and we're going to help him solve a problem that he has with his cabinets. Now he has a cabinet like this on both sides of his refrigerator and the access is kind of limited and he doesn't get very good use of his space. And so we're going to take the doors and drawers off and we're going to rework his cabinet, his pantry. This is his pantry, both sides. So we're going to make a better access for his pantry on this. And then later on, we're going to talk to Jared a little bit about a new video that we're going to have him do for us. And we'll introduce that to you toward the end of this video. So stay tuned for that too. We're ready to start tearing our cabinet apart. We're going to be taking the doors off, the drawers out. We're going to be removing anything off of the interior of our cabinet. And we're also going to be taking this face frame off. Now, we've determined that the wall of the cabinet is 3/4, but this face frame is 2.5 inches, and there's just no need for that to take up that much space of our cabinet. So we're going to take the face frame off, and once we get all of the doors and drawers and face frame off, then we're going to make a decision on what to design to make our cabinet space more useful. So let's get tearing it apart. Our pantry is on both sides of our refrigerator. And so what I did is I started tearing this side apart before I do that side so that you can see what we're going to end up like. And then I'll show you what we do to get there. Our pantry is just a box, had a face frame, doors and drawers. We've taken one shelf out. We're going to leave one shelf. We've decided what we're going to do is put roll-out shelves here, leave the fixed shelf, and then do a single door all the way up to match the single doors that are on this side of the kitchen. They have some storage here in a broom closet. We're going to make doors that are similar to this here, and so they have these tall doors all the way across, but behind these doors they'll have roll-out shelves. So let's go ahead and take this part apart, this side apart, and I'll show you how I did all that. We'll start off by removing the drawers. The drawers are nice drawers, but they just don't allow for a lot of access to the other parts. The drawers were nice, they're also very high, and so we're going to remove the drawers. We'll take the drawer guides out. Next thing we'll do is remove the doors. We're saving the doors because we're going to reuse the hinges in order to match the rest of the hinges. It's this old dado style hinge. They still use them, but not very often because now we have soft close pocket hinges. But we're going to reuse these so that it matches the rest of the way through the kitchen. They just screw to the inside of the face frame. Like this. We'll save all our screws and our hinges. Let's work on this one up here so you can see it a little better. Sorry, my arms and hands in the way. This is very tight quarters. You can see how this little hinge works. It just screws to the back side of the door and to the inside of the face frame, and the hinge pivot comes to the outside of the door to allow the door to open all the way. These were very common years ago, and like I say, they can still use them, they just don't very often anymore, but we're going to use them on this. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is take our drawer guides out for the drawers that were in here. They just screwed to the inside of the face frame, and then some mounting blocks in the back, and we're going to remove the screws and the mounting blocks. And then the face frame, we're going to show you how that face frame pops off. It's so easy. We have everything disconnected from the face frame, and the face frame was just face nailed, glued and face nailed. And so that's all we've got to do is just knock it loose. And it comes right off. And there's our face frame. Now we'll make a new face frame that'll be a different figure than this, but it'll go on the same way. We'll use the exact same cabinet, put the face frame back on, that will be ready for our new configuration and our single door. We'll be leaving the top shelf just like we did on the other side, but this shelf has got to come out. Now the shelves originally were dadoed in, so the plywood side is 3/4 of an inch, and the dado is about halfway through, and a 3/4 inch plywood shelf. In order to get that out without destroying the cabinet, what we're going to do is we're going to saw with our jigsaw the center portion of this shelf out, and then break out the rest of it. That will save our cabinet sides without destroying the cabinet, and yet get rid of the shelf that we no longer want. So that's our next thing. All right, now we can break the rest of this out and get rid of this center shelf. Take a chisel or a screwdriver. I just happen to only have a screwdriver here. You want to be careful. We don't want to ruin our plywood side, but we want to break free of our dado. So that one's a little more difficult. Let's see if we can loosen it up a little bit. Well, let's try the other side. Let's loosen that up a little bit. Same thing, we got to be careful not to damage our refrigerator either. There we go, that's what I was hoping for, is to have it pop like that. There's what we're after. All right, that's the way it comes out, bits and pieces. This is the support in the back for that shelf, and we don't need that either. So we'll pull that out. There we go. Now let's see if we can get this other shelf to come. I think we're getting some progress now. There we go. You heard it pop. Glue popped. There we are. That's what we're after. Yeah, just like that. There's our shelf out. Okay, we're going to clean up our mess a little bit. Then we're going to take some measurements, and we'll show you the measurements that we're going to take. We've now got this all taken care of, cleaned up a little bit. We're going to take the original face frame back to the shop and use some of the measurements off of it. This top rail has got to be the size that will come down and cover this top shelf. Same with the bottom rail, it has to be up to the floor. Our cabinet is 17 and 17 and 9/16 wide. And so that's how wide we're going to make our face frame. We are not going to have any cross pieces, any rails in our face frame that exist right now. We're only going to have a top and a bottom, and the rest of it will be open. We're going to put just a little 1/4 inch facing on this shelf on both sides so that our door will fit over the top, but the plywood edge will not show. And all of our other plywood edges are shown. Again, like I said, originally our face frame was 2.5 inches wide. And so we were losing 1 3/4 of our space inside the face frame. And that really cut down the access to our cabinet. Now, because we have face frames everywhere else, we don't want to eliminate our face frames totally, because then it would not look right in the kitchen. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a 1.5 inch face frame on both sides, and that will pick up an extra 1 inch on each side of our cabinet. And so we're going to make our opening 2 inches wider than it was. That'll give us a lot more shelf space, a lot more access. Down here, we're going to put 4 roll-out shelves and have full roll-out shelves. That will make access to the back of our cabinet, which is skinny but deep. That'll make our access to the back of our cabinet much easier, much more convenient, especially down low. We'll be able to pull out those full extension. We're going to use Blum soft close full extension drawer guides. We'll show you those when we build the rollout shelves. But we're going to use those for our rollout shelves. Again, like we talked about, we're going to use the same hinges and build the door the same way to match. But when you open up the inside, the convenience factor is going to be so much better than what they have now. We're going to leave this top shelf because you don't want your rollout shelf so high you can't see into it. And so our top rollout shelf is going to be right about here. We'll be able to have easy sight access to our shelf, and you'll have one fixed shelf behind the door. So off to the cabinet shop, build doors and drawers. Okay, here we are in the shop getting started on Jared's remodel on his kitchen. I made myself a little list while I was there of the things that I needed to do. I broke the job down into 4 things that I needed to do in order to be able to take care of his little pantry side, refrigerator side pantries. We needed to make a face frame. We needed to remake a door, or make a new door that fit. We needed to make rollout shelves, and we needed to make some special mounting blocks for our drawer guides, for our full extension side guides. And I'm going to show you those things. But let's start off. I came in early this morning. I milled my wood to the thickness that I wanted, 3/4 of an inch, because that mount matches the face frames that are above it, and we're going to be right up underneath them. I'm going to put these 2 face frames side by side so you can see how much difference there is in the amount of spacing because of the thin size and the large size of the face frames. You can see, and you can see how much space we are saving by having a thinner face frame. I also wanted to show you one little trick here. Because I have a tall, skinny face frame like this, and I'm going to be putting it on an existing cabinet, pieces like this have a tendency to flex. If I was in the shop, I could make sure that I got them all nailed on correctly, but I'm going to be nailing them onto a cabinet that is existing. So I made myself a little spacer that is exactly the width of my rail, and I just tacked it in the middle here to hold my face frame perfectly parallel all the way up and down. And I'm going to leave that on until after I mount my face frame on the cabinet. And then this is just tacked on with a couple of real thin, real small little brads, headless pins, and we'll just take this little spacer piece off. But what that's going to do is allow me to put the face frame on and make sure that I haven't allowed my face frame to expand or contract with the flexibility of the rails, or stiles, excuse me. So that's just a little trick that I learned. In fact, I'm going to bring it up close and let you see how I did that. I just notched around the face frame, and then I put 2 little pins in the face frame there. This is not glued in. I'll just pop that out at the job. And that's something that I have done in the past with situations like this. It just allows me to make sure that my face frame is parallel all the way down, especially for the fact that on this particular cabinet, we have a 3/8 lip door to go along with those hinges that we're reusing. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. The next thing that we have to do is the mounting blocks for our full extension undermount drawer guide. So this is our undermount drawer guide, soft close, And that's what we're going to be putting our rollout shelf on. We're going to be going on either side here. Now, remember, we have a face frame. Now, this is not typical of, like if we were doing a European style cabinet that had no face frame, we could mount this right on the side of the cabinet, or if we had hinges, we would use our little spacer blocks. We did a video on putting rollout shelves in a cabinet. I'll reference that to you, but give you a link to that so you can see the little 1-inch spacer blocks that we used. This is different because we have a face frame, so we can't use a standard plastic spacer block that is provided by the manufacturer, so we had to make our own. And we have hinges on one side, but not on the other. So these are the little spacer blocks that I made. This spacer block will, goes like this. Screws to the side of the cabinet. So this is the side of the cabinet. Here's where your face frame would sit. And your drawer guide will fit in there. And if I make sure that I'm level here when I mount this to the inside of the cabinet, this little lip that I put at the bottom holds my drawer guide while I screw it in. And it's 7/8 on one side, so the drawer guide will be close to the face frame. And on the other side, my spacer block is wider to allow for the hinges that will be on the side of where the door mounts. There'll be a hinge, and you've got to have a space to allow for the pivot for the hinge. So you have to space your drawer guide in to allow for that spacing. And so here is the wider spacer block, mounting block, again with the little lip. We'll mount that to the side of the cabinet and then mount the drawer guide to it. So the little spacer blocks, large ones on one side, skinny ones on the other. And the doors on these two pantry units, the doors will hinge to the outside, so they open toward the refrigerator. The large mounter block will go on the side where the hinges are. The small mounting block will go on the inside toward the refrigerator, and that will allow our mounting blocks to be maximizing the space that is available, but still giving us spacing out from the face frame. All right, the next thing that we have to build is the door. Now, we'll have a tall, skinny door. We talked about it. The door is going to be 15 3/8 inches wide by 63.5 inches high. We determined that by the size of the face frame that we just got through making. In fact, that's one of the reasons I did the face frame first, is because by doing the face frame first, that tells me the measurements for the door and for the rollout shelves, and everything that I have to do is based upon the size of the face frame. And so always first with the face frame on a thing like that. This is the material that I'm going to be using, and we're going to make, you've seen me make table saw shaker doors. This is going to be a similar thing. These are going to be raised panels. We're matching the existing door that is in the house, which is just really kind of a shaker, square style and rail frame, and a saw cut raised panel. And that's the way we're going to do it. And so we're going to build the door now, and I'll show you how we're going to do it. This is the material that we're going to use. There was some, this is cypress. We're using the frames out of cypress. And poplar for the panels. We've glued up the panels and we've milled them down to thickness. We've got our cypress milled down to thickness, and we also have it already cut into length. And you know how I like to do things double wide. All of this is double wide. And so we're going to head over to the saw now, and we're going to do our table saw raised panel door. We're now getting ready to cut our groove for our panels, and we've set the saw at 3/8 of an inch high. We're going to set our fence at 1/4 of an inch, because that's going to be the space on the back side of our panel. I've removed the riving knife. Typically we would leave a riving knife in, but this riving knife on this particular saw blade is too high for a channel cut like we're going to do. So we've removed the riving knife, and what we're going to do is we're going to cut a channel on both sides of our rail stock and on both sides of our stile stock, and then we're going to make our tail cut on the end of our rail stock after we do the channel cut. We're going to make 2 or 3 cuts until our channel, our groove, is 1/4 of an inch wide, and that will allow for our panel to set in there. So let's just go ahead and finish up on that. By resetting the height of our saw blade and our fence, we were able to complete the cut of our tongue for our groove. So tongue and groove, and now it fits right in there. We want it to fit very snug. I'll have to even just maybe clean up that saw cut, but you can see how the tongue and groove will fit together, and that will complete our doors. What we'll do now is we'll cut all of our boards in half, because I make them in 2 pieces. We'll cut our boards in half now, and that will make, these will be our rails, and these will be our stiles, and then we're ready to make the panel. With a little bit of touch-up on the tongues, they fit together perfect, nice and smooth. We're ready to assemble the doors as soon as we make the panels. That's next. We determined by the measurement of our stile and rail that our panel had to be 10 3/8 by 58 1/8, and now we'll go ahead and cut our raised panel, our saw cut raised panel. We are now getting ready to cut the raised panel portion of our door. We have cut our panels to size, of course. Now we've got our stiles and rails done, we're getting ready to do this. We've set our saw at 1 5/8. We've determined that the distance from the inside of where the panel will be to this little shoulder cut here is 1 5/8. And so we've set it at 1 5/8, and that's the first thing we're going to do, is we're just going to make a kerf cut, basically, that will create a square edge at the edge of the top side of our panel. And we'll do that first, then we'll set our saw at an angle. Now, I have removed the riving knife. This saw blade is a little bit smaller, and so the riving knife is a little too tall to allow us to make cuts like that. So we're going to be making all these cuts with the riving knife removed, and we're just going to be extra careful to make sure that we don't have our fingers in the way. We need to run this across the saw and make our cut. We'll do that first, make sure we're in the right spot, and then we'll do that on the face of our panel all the way around, and then get ready for the angle cut. We've created that little kerf cut all the way around. Now we'll go back and bevel. Now that we've made our little cut, and these are the cutoffs of the end of our panel, so this is the exact thickness and width of our panel, and the reason we're going to use this to set our saw is so that we can make the cut exactly the way we want to. Now, this is one of the rail pieces. What we're going to do is we're going to bring our saw blade up to the height of our kerf cut, and then we're going to begin to tilt our blade at an angle until we're basically at an angle about, let me draw this on here, it's going to kind of be like that. Now that's a rough cut like that, but that's kind of what we're after. We're going to test it and make sure that it fits in our groove that our rail and stile and rail has created. We're going to make that fit. We're going to make sure that it fits exactly where it wants before we cut the panels. And so this is kind of a keep working with it until we get it just right type situation. We don't have an exact, but when we get there, I will tell you exactly how we have it set, so that if you decide to cut your raised panel the same way on a saw, that I'll have the measurement and the angles for you. Okay, so let's get started. First off, by raising our blade to the height of our kerf cut, and you want it just to the bottom. You don't want it too high. You want it just to the bottom of that kerf cut. So right there, we'll set that right there, and then we want our inside of the narrow part of our angle cut needs to be a little less than 1/4 of an inch, but we're going to set it at 1/4 of an inch first, and we're going to set our blade at a greater angle than we think we'll be using, so that we can go back to what we think we ought to have. It's just kind of a way that I have done in the past that I find works best for me. We're going to start at about 12.5 degrees. And I think that's going to be pretty good. There we are. We're 12 degrees, 12.5 degrees. We're going to set our fence at 1/4 of an inch, which is going to be too much. We know that that's going to be too thick. We've got to put the end of our panel has got to fit in 1/4 of an inch, but it needs to be 1/4 of an inch part way up the cut. So let's just take a little preliminary cut and see where we are. And I can tell right now that our angle is not sharp enough. So before we even make our first cut, let's back off to 15 degrees. And we're just going to make a tiny little beginning of a cut. You can see how we begin to make the cut. We're not deep enough on our kerf yet. We're not thin enough. So I'm just going to work our way through, and I'll let you watch me as I do this. We're going to, it might be pretty close to the right angle on my saw blade at 15 degrees, but let's take it back. We're going to move our fence in to 3/16. We're getting pretty close to where we want to be on this end, but we're still too heavy on this end. So let's back, let's go down from 15 degrees, 14 degrees, and let's not reset our fence and see where that gives us. All right, I'm going to move my fence over just a 32nd of an inch, not even a full 1/16 of an inch, just a 32nd of an inch. So I'm like 5/32 on my saw fence right now, and I'm at 14 degrees on my blade. So let's see where we end up now. Well, I think my 14 degrees is okay, but I think I might be too close on my fence. You know, actually, I'm not even going to move that back more than just a tiny little bump. I'm going to take my saw blade just a shade higher, not much, because I need to cut through that flat spot on my kerf cut, but I'm going to leave my angle at 14 degrees. So let's see where we are here now. Okay, I need to go. I have another scrap piece here. I don't want to get my hands too close to the saw where I'm using just a scrap piece. It'll be much easier when I'm holding onto a full panel. But while I'm setting the saw, I want to make sure I don't get my hands too close. I like the angle on the raised panel portion. Oh, I'm just exactly where I want to be. Okay, we are just a shade less, and I mean not even a real measurement, just a bump less than 3/16 on our saw fence. We're at 14 degrees on our blade tilt, and we set our saw blade height at 1 5/8 because that's where our kerf line was 1 5/8. So that is right where we want to be. And when we put our panel in, it fit. Let's see if we can break that out. There, that's just exactly what I wanted. Okay, here's our panel. Here's our rail stock. We slide it in like that, and see how it doesn't bottom out all the way? That gives room for our space ball. And when we put it together, I'll show you the space ball, but that is exactly where we want to have our cut. It fits tight in our style and rail, but allows room for our space ball. It allows our cut to be right, and it gives us our little shoulder that was on our original door. This is exactly what we wanted, and we did it by just using a piece of scrap and experimenting and setting our saw blade a little at a time until we found exactly what we're after. Now we're going to go through and we're going to cut our panel, and our panel being big enough to hold on to it better, we'll be able to be safe with our cuts. Okay, we have completed our cuts. We have created a nice raised panel with the same edge. You can see as we put the two pieces close to one another, they look very similar, and that's what we're after. Before we assemble, we'll take our block sander and we'll sand our profile so that it's all nice and smooth and ready for paint, and then we'll sand the front and back of our panel before we assemble also. So that's the next step, sand. We now have our panel sanded. Here's our stiles, here's our rails. One of the things we want to do before we assemble is to take a little sanding block and sand off the faces of our stile and rail pieces, because they will be very difficult to try to sand, almost impossible to sand afterwards. And so even though this is a paint grade piece, we still want to have our saw marks sanded out. So we do that. All right. And then we have some space balls to put in. Now, if you have watched any of my videos on putting doors together, you remember space balls, but let's just go over it. Space balls create the space where your panel is 1/4 of an inch narrower than the end of your rail, and that allows room for your expansion and contraction of the panel with heat and humidity. And so if you put a space ball in here, it helps keep your panel centered. And so you just squeeze these little rubber balls, and they're just little soft rubber balls, and you just squeeze them down into the groove of your stile and rail set. And I like to put 2 in the ends, and then on my rails, or on my stiles, I like to have one about every 10 or about 12 inches or thereabouts. So on a long door like this, several up and down like this would make sure that there was plenty in there. Whoop. And they're little and they fly. So, and I like to have them spaced so that they're right across from one another. That just, it's a personal thing, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't make any difference, I don't suppose. But that way, when I put the door together, those space balls help hold the panel centered so as it expands and contracts. If it does expand and contract a lot, then it doesn't create a big gap on one side, or a glue line or a paint line on one side or the other. Yeah, it just is a way to make a better door. It just makes a better door, and that's when you're always wanting to do whatever you can to improve your door. Okay, let's get ready to glue it up. I always take my end of my rail stock piece and I make a little mark, and I mark here like this so that I know how much glue to put on, because you don't glue in here anywhere. You only glue your stile and rail ends together, and so you don't want to have so much glue that it leaks out or squeezes out into the panel section, because you absolutely don't want to glue your panel in. Once your panel is glued in, then you're messed up big time. Make sure we got a hammer here to put it together, and I think I have a rubber hammer someplace. We found our rubber hammer. Okay, let's put some glue on here. Okay, and then I like to put in one rail at the end here. I made these tight so that they would fit tight. And a little tighter than I thought, maybe. Okay, and we'll put the panel in. Okay, looking good. All right, there's our door glued together. We'll wait for that to dry. Then we've got to sand, put an edge on it. We'll get going along on that as soon as it dries up. We're getting ready to build the rollout shelves for Jared's job. We're going to be using this size right here. Now, in the past, we've done rollout shelves and drawers out of 5/8 Baltic birch. With the supply chain issues that are now dealing with, Baltic birch is becoming a little harder to get a hold of. We've had some requests as to what can I use besides. Well, we decided in this case to use solid wood, so we're using poplar. I had Jared pick up some poplar from his local big box store. It was 3/4 of an inch thick, but it was not very straight. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we had to glue some up because it was only in smaller widths, and we're going to have to flatten it and then run it through the planer to plane it down to 5/8. So let's get started doing that. I had to glue two pieces together to get the width that I wanted. I marked the side that I wanted to do, but I wanted you to see something. Like I said, it wasn't very flat, and so if I put it on a flat surface, you can see that it's a little bit warped. And I always put my piece on a flat surface like this, and then that tells me where to apply my pressure to flatten it out. Now, down here, and that would take off the low spots. So when I push it through the jointer, I'm going to apply pressure on the corner here and the corner back here, and we'll run it through the jointer, and that will help flatten it off. And we'll do it 2 or 3 times, and then I put some pencil marks on the back side, and when those pencil marks even out, then I know that I'm fairly flat and I'm ready to go to the planer to plane it all down to 5/8. So let's just go ahead and go through, and I've done that to every piece that we need to have so that we know what we've got to do, and we're going to go ahead and flatten all of our stock, plane all of our stock, and get ready to cut it to size. Because we are using 5/8 poplar for our drawer, I wanted to be able to glue the corner together. Now, on a typical drawer that I do with the Baltic birch, I nail together with 1.5 inch nails, and I don't glue the corner or rabbet the corner or anything like that. The reason I don't is, first off, for production. It goes much faster when you don't do that and just do a butt joint. Also, Baltic birch holds a nail so extremely well that whenever I have made a mistake and I've tried to break the drawer apart in order to get started over, it just splits the wood. It's a great wood for drawers. However, like I say, because of supply chain issues, on this particular job we're using 5/8 poplar, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a rabbet on the back and front of this. This is the side right here, and we're going to end up making an angle cut, and I'm going to show that to you in a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to make a little rabbet cut on the front and the back that the front and back will fit into, and we're going to glue that joint and nail it so that it will be good and strong, because quite honestly, solid wood, you would be surprised, but solid wood doesn't hold the nail quite as well as that Baltic birch. And that may be my own experience. That's just what I've experienced in the course of doing drawers, that the Baltic birch on a butt joint is just a great joint, but whenever I do a solid wood drawer, I need a little extra holding power, and so we're going to create a little rabbet joint. So just watch as I get through. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a small kerf cut. I'm going to take out a little of the material to create, and then we're going to cut the front and back of the rollout to match the thickness that I need in order, or the width I need to make the drawer. Long explanation for a short process. Let's get started. Now we'll set our saw to the height of that little kerf cut that we just made. Make it a little bit lower so that we can raise it if we need to. And we're just going to take ever so slightly. Our wood is 5/8 of an inch thick, and I think we're going to set our saw at 9/16 and take a 1/16 inch off of that. So let's just see how we do here. That's kind of where we want it, but I think I want it a little bit more than that. So let's take a little bit more material off. And that's what we're looking at right there. Okay, and so when our end stock comes in, it will come in and fit and make a joint like that. I'll show you that when we get ready to put it together, but we've got it set right the way it's down. We only do this on the sides, and as soon as we get our sides cut, then we'll take a measurement to know what our fronts and backs need to be in order to give our right width. We have our little rabbet cut on the fronts and backs of the sides of our drawers. Now we need to determine exactly what is the width of our, or the piece that we need to cut our fronts and our backs. Now, the overall width of our rollout shelf is 13 inches. So what we do is we take our tape measure and we put 13 inches on this rabbet cut. We put our 13 inches at the end of the rabbet cut. We hold it right there, make sure we get it right exactly. And it tells us that 11 7/8 is going to be the width of the piece we need to cut for our front and back to give us a 13-inch wide rollout shelf. So 11 7/8. Now this is our piece of wood that we're going to use for the front, and we'll show you that in just a minute also. And then we have another piece over there for our back, and we're going to go ahead and cut those 11 7/8, and then that'll give us our measurement. And then we'll come back to the saw here and we'll get everything ready to go, and we'll make our angle cuts for the side. We have our sides ready to put an angle cut on. Here is our fronts. They're 2 5/8 high, and they have a groove, and our backs are 5 7/8 because they only go down to the groove, and they'll fit in the rabbet cut like that. Now, we're getting ready to cut the angle on the side of our rollout shelf. And I want to refer you, we'll give you a link to the video where we did rollout shelves, but you cut your angles by making this little jig, this homemade little jig that I do. You make it by marking 2 5/8. This is the front of our rollout shelf. This is the back. And so we make our front shorter, our back taller, with an angle cut. And so we set our side on this piece of wood. We marked it 2 5/8, and we lined our 2 5/8 up with the back, and then we set our back here so that it doesn't go all the way back. And then we nailed on some pieces to hold it in place. And I want you to watch me put this through the saw. You have to hold on to the saw, or hold on to your piece of wood real good, and push this whole jig through the saw, and it gives you a perfect angle cut. And then you just do lefts and rights, and there you are, ready to go for your rollout shelf. So just watch as I put these through the saw. And there you are, the side of your rollout shelf, perfectly cut. Your angle is the same on both sides because you use the jig all the way through. We have our rabbet cuts front and back. Let's finish cutting them and go put them together. As always, whenever we do anything that needs to be sanded but will be on the interior, we sand it first before we assemble it because you're not able to sand afterwards. So let's go ahead and sand the interior of our drawer. We're now getting ready to assemble our rollout shelf, and like I say, we're going to glue these corners together on the little rabbet, and so we're just going to put some very light little application of glue on there, and then we're going to put it together just like I would any other rollout shelf. We'll start with the front. Unfortunately, you were in a position where you couldn't see me. Let me see if I can turn this around so you can see better. Put our joint together like that. There. And then when we turn it over, because our top on our back is flush with the top. Now we're upside down, and we're going to put it in like this and put it together, because we want the top of our drawer to be flush and the bottom of our back to line up with the dado that we put in here to receive our 1/4 inch bottom. And so that's the way that's going together right now. And so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing and nail it together. Now, and I'm going to bring this real close so my video will show how that little rabbet joint works. See how that little rabbet joint fits in there? Now we're going to go ahead and sand and round all this so it'll be all nice and smooth. But you can see how that front and back fit into that rabbet joint so nice, and makes a real strong joint that we've glued. We've got some glue squeezing out here. We're going to have to clean that up. And now let's go ahead and get ready to put our bottom in. And so we need to measure our 1/4 inch bottom is going to be based on the, we just measure the groove. Our 1/4 inch bottom is going to be 12 1/4, and we're 21 inches long, less the thickness of our wood. And so let's go 21 inches. So 20 5/8 by, I gotta check my deal, measure twice, cut once, 12 1/4. 20 5/8, 12 1/4 by 20 5/8 is our bottom. I'll go cut those and we'll come back and put those in. We're getting ready to put our bottom in our drawer, our 1/4 inch bottom. What we do is we set our, now I've pre-sanded my 1/4 inch bottom so that I don't need to worry about sanding that after it's in. Slide it in, and I always put a little dab of glue here in the front groove, because we only staple it across the back. So our glue is up here. We slide our 1/4 inch bottom in. Make sure it lines up like it's supposed to. Pound it down. These are just small crown staples, 3/4 inch small crown staples. And there's our rollout shelf, just like that. We still have our glue to clean up in the corner, and we've got to sand it out, but there it is all together. And here's one that we've already put together and all sanded out and ready to go. And you can see how much space was in a rollout shelf, but we're going to go ahead and get those ready to install. We now have our door all put together. We've given it a rough preliminary sand, a rough sand of 80 grit, and we've put a 1/4 inch round over on the outside edge so that it now starts to look like what we have here. Our next thing that we need to do is we need to create this 3/8, what's called 3/8 lip. It's actually a 1/2 inch wide and 3/8 deep, and we put that around the back side of the door all the way around. And then we have to put the notches in to allow for the hinges. So the first thing we'll do is put this rabbet all the way around the back, and then we'll move forward with the notches. We accomplish that by setting our saw blade at 3/8 of an inch high, and then setting our fence at 3/8 of an inch. So we'll set this at 3/8 of an inch high, and we'll set our saw fence at 3/8 of an inch. We'll cut the flat part of it with the face of the door up, so the back of the door down. That will make our notch a 1/2 inch wide. Then we'll stand the door on end, and that'll give us our 3/8 deep. And we'll make a preliminary cut before we do that and make sure we have it right. We have a piece of wood here that is the thickness of the door, and we're going to just test it and make sure that our cuts are right. Okay, that cut is correct. And now we will do that all the way around the door, and then we'll tip our door on edge and make that cut, and that gives us exactly what we need. just perfect. So there's our 3/8 lip. Yeah, when we get all done, this section of the wood will be eliminated from the back side of the door, and we'll have a 1/2 inch wide, 3/8 deep notch. So let's go ahead and do it. We've now made our preliminary cut all the way around. Now we'll stand our door on end and make our other cut and complete our rabbet cut. Just like that. And we'll go ahead and finish that the rest of the way around. Now that we have the rabbet cut on the back side of our door, we now need to create these notches that where the hinges go. Let me show you how that works. The notch is just made by a saw cut. Our hinge fits like this, screws to the back of the door, and the hinge fits in a notch like that. And so we've set our saw blade high enough to create that angle of a kerf. And so we need to be very careful when we do this, but we have to make these notches to fit the existing hinge. We could use a rabbet, but we could use a dado head and make it, because it's got to be 2 saw blades width. But we're just going to do it with our saw single blade, and we'll just create that notch like that. So the hinge fits there, and then it will screw to the face frame on the other side when we get to mounting the doors. So let's go ahead and get started doing that. And again, because the saw blade is so tall on here, so high, we need to be very, very careful how we're doing this. We're going to be placing 4 hinges down the side of the door, and we're going to be spacing our hinge in 2 inches to our first cut. This is a much taller door, so I think we're going to space our hinge 2 1/4 inch to more match the size of our door. And our notch needs to just be in from the edge of the door 5/8 of an inch. So once we get our first little cut made, we're going to draw a line on the edge of our fence here where we will stop the penetration to our blade. So let's make a preliminary cut here, and let's mark our door 5/8 of an inch in right there, so we know where to stop our cut. And then when we make our little mark on the saw fence, then we know we don't have to mark every last door, and we can make our cuts based on that. There we go. We're 5/8 of an inch deep, and we're going to make us a mark on our fence right there, and that is how deep we'll make all our cuts. Now we're going to go ahead and go through and notch all of our doors, and then we'll come back and do the final sand on our doors. We're just about ready to finish off on the things that we need to get done before we head off to Jared's house for the installation. The last thing we've got to do is do a little work on our rollout shelves. We sent these over to the paint shop, had him put a clear coat on them so they're nice and finished. And now we've got to work on the bottom side. And so I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to show you the undermount drawer guide that we're going to use. Has a little pin on the back, and we have to drill a hole in the back side of the drawer to accept that pin, just like that. So what I did is I just made me a little jig, and this little jig just fits over the back of the drawer and allows me to position that hole just right on both sides. And we're going to go through and do that on all of our drawer guides. Also, we now have to screw on the capture devices. Now, the drawer guide, we just showed you the drawer guide fits on like this, undermount drawer guide, but it has to have a capture device on the front of the drawer to click into. So let's just listen and you can hear it. That has a little bit quieter click, and then that is the release. This little capture device screws in to the underneath side of the front of the rollout shelf, and as you slide it into the cabinet, it captures the front of the drawer guide, and the pin holds the back of the drawer guide so that the drawer guide is firm and holds on your rollout shelf. So we're going to go ahead and drill all of the holes. Oops, got to release the Kraken. So anyway, and these capture devices are just held in by these 5/8 by 6 screws, and we just I gotta put my glasses on, I can't see the little screw. Oh, looky there. Okay, and we just screw into here like this. The little screw goes right there. So we're going to go ahead and complete by putting all of the capture devices on, drill all the holes, and then we're going to head off to install. We're installing the rollout shelf guide blocks. This is to hold the drawer guide, and so we have spaced it from we put our bottom one flushed to the floor. We used a spacer to make sure that we're even from side to side. And then we'll just go ahead and screw the block in like that, and then the drawer guide will fit in there. I'll show you that in just a second. As I work my way up, I will take the spacer block and turn it like this, and I'll now set another drawer guide on top of that. And by using my spacer block, I have my drawer guides spaced evenly on both sides all the way up. I'm going to go ahead and finish getting my spacer blocks in, and then I'll show you how we put the drawer guides in. Now that we have the mounting blocks in place, we have a little lip at the bottom of every mounting block to level up our drawer guide. We're going to slide it on there, set it back 1/4 of an inch, and then let me get my hands in here. We'll set this back just 1/4 of an inch. And then we'll bring our screw gun in here. And we mount our drawer guide to our block. And we'll go ahead and do the rest of the drawer guides the same way. Our rollout shelves now have the locking devices screwed into them. You just lay them on the drawer guides, you slide it back, and click. And then there you are. And soft close, just like that. So there's your installation of your rollout shelf. Once you get your drawer guides in and get your locking devices, they click in real easy. We're going to go ahead now and put the face frame on, and then we just have the doors. To remove your rollout shelf, put your hands on both sides, and you just pull the little clip like that on either side, on both sides at once, and it releases the locking device, and then your rollout shelf just comes right out. And put it back in, click, and there it's locked in. There you go, that's how it's done. Easy in, easy out. We applied the glue to the face of our existing cabinet. We're now nailing on our new drawer face, our new face frame, excuse me. And we're just going to nail right through the face of it to attach it to the existing cabinet. And we have a spacer stick that I made that will help us make sure that we maintain the right distance, and it is. So we're in good shape there. And we just make sure that our spacing is correct all the way up and down, and it is. And we'll go ahead and finish nailing on our face frame. Okay, There's our cabinet nailed together. And we'll go ahead and put the rest of the rollout shelf. I wanted to talk a little bit about these rollout shelves. We built these and got them all done. We sent them over to Jared in his paint shop. He put on a sanding sealer and a finish coat of lacquer to seal them all and get them all nice and smooth. We had a video made of that, and we're going to provide you a link to that video so that you can see how Jared used his equipment in his paint shop to put a nice finish on our rollout shelves. We just love rollout shelves. We're doing the rollout shelves for Jared in his kitchen today, and we're doing a video to show you how he does the finish. I want you to come with us to the paint shop and watch us do the finish on these rollout shelves. Jared's going to show us all the tricks and the equipment. Let's go. Well, we have Jared all taken care of. We're not going to finish putting the door on because Jared's going to be taking all of this off, taking it back to his shop and painting it. But we have our rollout shelves installed. We have our door here ready to go. And we finished a great job for Jared to get a little update on his kitchen. You can see how these tall doors match the tall doors to the side. And we're excited to be able to help Jared get a little bit of updating and a little more use of the storage space for his kitchen. This is the kind of fun things we do on Woodworking with Wes.